girl now, just fresh out of high school, and the most traumatic experience was when I was a kid. I had just graduated from elementary school, and my mom works from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. She mostly stayed late because of overtime trying to support me. You see, I was an only child, and my dad was a drunk. He left us when I was 2. My mom told me that they were arguing one day about his alcohol spending to a point where he couldn't take it anymore and hit my mom. Shortly after, she called the cops and filed a restraining order. I never really got to know him. I don't even remember any of this happening because I was too young. Quite honestly, I wish it had stayed that way. So here I was, all alone at home. It was 4 p.m. in the afternoon when I heard a knock on the door. I thought my mom had finally come home. On time today, so I ran to open the door without looking at who was there. As soon as I opened the door, I saw a scuffled, old, dirty man at the door. He asked,
"Hey, is your mom home?"
I replied no, and simply shut the door. Even though I was still a kid, I was smart enough not to speak with strangers. After that, I wondered whether or not that was a good idea, because it kept bothering me. In an attempt to forget what happened, I went to the living room and turned on the TV. I tuned into TVO and quietly watched Arthur. As I was watching, it suddenly started flickering, and the screen went black. As soon as it happened, I started thinking about that old man, and found it strange how he asked for my mom only because no one else knows about how she's the only legal guardian in the household. Moreover, the TV was brand new, so maybe the man was behind all of this. Something seemed very odd about this man, and I couldn't tell what it was. He just lingered in my head the entire time I stared at the empty TV screen. After a couple minutes, it switched back on and switched to another channel. It was a game show. I never saw this before, and when I tried to click on info on my TV remote, it wouldn't respond. In fact, none of the buttons responded. I stared at the screen, trying to recognize the show host, but nothing clicked. He pointed straight to the camera. His exact words were, "It might be you who's next." I know he said that I, out of all the people in this country, could be the next guest on the show, but the way he was pointing directly to the camera felt like he was pointing at me. I quickly turned the TV off and stayed quiet for a few moments. This whole day seemed strange and abnormal. At this point, I had the sudden urge to go to the kitchen and get something to eat, just to calm my mind. Since my mother usually came late, I always ate alone. Nothing in the fridge except old leftovers from a week ago when my mom made her usual pasta. As soon as I reached for the leftovers, I heard a sound near the back entrance of my house. As I reached for the pasta, all the lights turned off and I freaked out. It was already dark outside because it was winter and the clock out in the living room read 5:45. All I remember after that was waking up in the attic, or I think it was an attic. I didn't know we had an attic, I told myself. Then it hit me. I knew I wasn't at home because we never had an attic. I started panicking and kicking the attic door open. But no luck. Loud footsteps approached near the door, and I yelled out,
"Help!"
But nothing. There was nothing in the attic that could have helped me escape, just a glass window that would be too tough to break, and the fall down would definitely break my back. I didn't know what time it was, but the sky was pitch black, so I knew it was past midnight. I wish my mom was here, I kept telling myself. She probably called the cops by now. As I was about to fall asleep in this dreadful attic, I heard the door squeak open, little by little. I saw a light at the end of the door. Was this it? Am I dead?
"Dinner is served. Please come downstairs."
I didn't get a really close look at who spoke to me, but as I went downstairs, I saw a beautiful wooden table with plenty of delicious food. This has to be a dream or a nightmare. As I got closer to the dining table, I realized a man was sitting at the other end of the table. I wiped my eyes to get a better look at him, and noticed that he looked very familiar. But where have I seen him before? At that moment, I realized he was the dirty old man who came to my house. I started crying. I didn't know what to do. He said,
"Don't cry, my child."
But I couldn't control myself. I just wanted to be safe at home.
"Please sit, have some food. You look very hungry."
I kept crying and crying, and then there it was. the door leading to outside. Whether it was to the backyard or to the front yard, I didn't care. I just wanted to leave this wretched place. Without hesitation, I ran for the door, which was to my left, but it was locked shut. There were no key locks on the door. I felt hands grabbing me, and at that point I fainted and I blacked out. I awoke next to my mother in the hospital. I was so relieved that she was beside me. I asked her what had happened and where that creepy old guy was. She looked at me confused and told me that I had fell unconscious when I freaked out after the lights went out. She said I've been unconscious for an entire day. Soon after, we checked out of the hospital and took a cab home. The freakiest thing was, while we were waiting for the taxi, I swear I saw that old creepy man across the street, just staring at me. I kept shaking my mom's arm to tell her to look at that man across the street, but she ignored me until the taxi came. While we got in the taxi, I looked back only to see that he was no longer there. A couple of days before my high school graduation, out of nowhere, I asked my mom if she remembers the time I went to the hospital because I fainted from a blackout during winter. She stared at me and her face went pale. She told me that I actually did get kidnapped, but that man was actually my father. The sad part is that the only time I got to spend time with my father was when he kidnapped me, and I honestly never knew who the hell he was.
I'm so terrified. I'm crouched in a corner of a closet in one of our guest rooms. Too scared to make a sound. Can't breathe, so scared he will find me. And I can't stop shaking. Oh god. Hell, I can't fucking stop. If you're reading this, please, send help. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. Please, tell them everything I'm about to tell you. Maybe they can help me. Maybe it'll help them find him. Just please, send help. This happened a couple weeks ago. My husband and I planned a trip to this prison that was shut down. I can't give names, but it's a prison in Mansfield, Ohio. We went there as thrill seekers because we read so many stories about the horrors behind those walls. People claimed that night something would grab them or hit them. Apparently the people that died there were either beaten or murdered in some gruesome way by the staff. But whatever the case, I just found it hilarious and something to check off my bucket list. My husband and I drove there and spent the night until about 6 a.m. There were about 20 or so random strangers roaming the halls. The guide said something about seeing apparitions if we're really quiet and walk in complete darkness. The entire night was pretty much a joke. We saw a bunch of cells in the east and west wings, but nothing too scary. Just broken down and rusted cells left there from previous tenants. You might think this background story is useless. I promise you it's not. I wish we never went there. I wish I had just stayed at home with my husband, but it's too late now. What happened next sealed our fate up until now. My husband and I were walking to the 4th floor of the prison. The disgusting stench of rusting metal and empty, dirty cells all around us. Our map indicated we were near the infirmary. I started hearing some weird chanting in the room in front of us, chanting and buzzing. We walked into the dark room and saw a group of people in a circle. The only light among them was coming from this box. Someone would ask the box a question, and all you'd hear is buzz. Nothing too important. We walked past them to another room down the hall. No one was here. It was just the two of us. We entered the room and we were met with a chair in the middle of the room. Just a chair and a window. On the window there was a sign that read, "Do not use your cameras. Do not take pictures." I remember it was odd that we could take pictures everywhere but here. My husband started chuckling, and being the rebellious man that he was, he started to take several pictures around the room. Just as my husband took the last picture, the room became disturbingly quiet. The chanting and buzzing stopped. I could even hear the normal sounds of the room. It was just too damn quiet. I got a weird chill down my spine and a horrible feeling sank to my stomach. I grabbed my husband's arms and rushed out the room. I walked fast down the hall, and what I saw next drained the blood from my face. The box. The box was still there, but the people around it weren't the same. Like, they were all hunched backwards. And I don't mean they were lying back. I mean their backs were bent backwards. Their eyes were popping out of their socket, and their arms were in odd angles. There was no blood, just bodies. Disturbing bodies. I stared at them. I couldn't move. The next thing I felt was my husband shaking me. I looked at him, and he looked confused. I pointed at the bodies and he looked down and said, "What? What is it?" I looked back at the bodies and nothing. They were gone. I didn't want him to think I was crazy, so I made him take me back home. I couldn't stop the horrible images from appearing in my head. I didn't know what to do. I tried to sleep during the ride home, but I couldn't. Growing up, I was convinced I'd be abducted by aliens. I lived in constant sleep-deprived fear as every strange shadow and every reflection of light on the wall signified the beginning of what I knew would be my end. Logic told me the shadows were just piles of dirty clothes or my coat rack, that the reflections were just from passing cars on the street below. But logic fails in the face of terror. If it weren't for my older brother, Jason, with whom I shared the bedroom, there was a very real chance I would have lost my mind. I remember my 13th birthday with the same detached sense of helpless violation as a victim of sexual assault. The day itself had been fine. Pleasant, even. My parents, who were always caring and supportive, did their best to make sure my birthday was enjoyable. They knew I was stressed. They knew I was anxious. I never told them why, though. Only Jason knew, and he promised to keep it a secret. After the festivities, I went up to my room to play video games. I had 2 hours to play before lights out. Jason sat on his immaculately made bed, which was in stark contrast to my messy one, and watched, offering pointers as I died over and over. 2 hours went by quickly, and Dad came in to say it was time to go to sleep. He sat next to Jason on the bed and let me know he was proud of me. How I'd been brave despite having a hard time, and that things would be better. He wished me a happy birthday and kissed me goodnight, switching off the light on his way out of the room. For a little while, I felt pretty good. Like I said, I never told my parents exactly what had been bothering me. They'd ask every so often, but they wouldn't pry. They could tell I was struggling. I heard them cleaning up downstairs, comforted by the fact that they were still awake and alert. With a sense of security I hadn't felt in a long time, I drifted off to sleep. After a couple hours, I woke up and glanced at the clock. 11:26. I closed my eyes again. Before I could drift off to sleep, I noticed something. The room smelled bad. It wasn't a scent I could identify in the slightest. It was heavy and medicinal, but organic. Strange. Alien. My eyelids lifted to the sight of something shuffling towards my bed. I tried to shout and bolt away, but nothing worked. no movement, no sound. Only my eyes could receive my commands, and they stared, bulging out of my skull, as Thing stood over my body. I knew it would finally come to me. This was the day I'd anticipated and dreaded for years. I tried to make out the features on his face. All I could pick up on was hideousness, deformity, a head with its upper left quadrant missing, a mouth with no lower mandible, and a shriveled tongue lolling down to its skinny neck.
Robbie.
It gurgled. It knew my name. It had been studying me, and it knew my name.
No more me, Robbie. No more me. Time to grow up.
Its head came down and touched my forehead with the remains of its upper lip. As it tilted, maggots tumbled out of this cratered skull and landed on my face. They squirmed and tumbled onto my pillow. I felt them writhing against my ears and the sides of my neck.
I'll miss you.
It turned and walked toward Jason's bed. I tried over and over to scream as panic suffused the entirety of my being. The dark world around me blurred, and I knew I was going to pass out. I knew I was going to fail my brother and not be able to warn him before the creature reached him. Before I lost consciousness, before I passed into a dreamless morass of black. I hated myself for being so useless, for being so weak. My mother's shrill, panicked shriek catapulted me back into reality. The room was bright. It was morning. Mom stood over Jason's bed wailing and sobbing, and I heard Dad thundering across the room from their bedroom. He burst into the room and immediately saw what Mom did. I watched his knee tremble, as if he were about to fall. I didn't move. Everything from the night was coming back, and I knew, I was certain, Jason was dead. My big brother was gone. The certainty was overwhelming, and searing tears leaked down my cheeks onto the pillow. Something wriggled against my neck. I gasped and leapt to my feet. Everything went slowly for the next few minutes. I turned and saw the ring of maggots around my headprint on the pillow. Dad was crossing the room to take me in his arms when he saw the bugs on my pillow and in my hair and whispered, "Oh my God." He picked me up. He hadn't done that in years. I rolled out of the room in his strong arms.
Don't look at your brother's bed,
he ordered. I couldn't help myself. I looked as we exited. One glance was all I need. Jason's body was on the bed. He was wearing a stained and dirt-encrusted blue suit. Oh no, I thought to myself, as I took in his injuries. The torn lower mandible, the caved-in skull, the desiccated green-gray skin that was mostly gone. Mom's racking sobs had escalated to hysterical screaming. As Dad and I rounded the corner and headed downstairs, we heard her shouting,
"How did you come back? Why are you here? Who did this?"
Dad whispered in my ear as we walked.
It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. We don't know who did it, but it's going to be alright. It's not your brother anymore. It's just a body he doesn't need. He's still in heaven, okay? He's still in heaven.
I started to shake, and Dad's voice cracked with emotion as he spoke those last words. It sounded horribly, horribly familiar. I closed my eyes and saw a coffin. I saw my parents standing next to it, sobbing. I saw a large, framed picture of Jason in a room full of friends and family. But I also saw the toys I was playing with. And I saw Jason sitting next to me. We played while everyone else cried. He grinned and said, "Don't be upset, Robbie. I'll be here to help while you grow up. You don't have to feel sad." My Aunt Lindsay came up to me and stood in the exact same spot where Jason was sitting. I remember thinking it was strange she could do that, and then she knelt down and said, "He's in heaven," before walking back to my cousins and uncle. Jason winked at my confused face. Then we kept playing with our toys. "Jason died," I whispered to Dad. He nodded, and I watched as he eyed the muddy footprints from the back door, which led down the hallway and up the stairs to my room.
You were probably too young to remember, but he loved you so much.
I thought back to all the fun we'd had in our room over the years, all leading up to the video games on my 13th birthday that night.
You're the same age as he was now,
Dad said, and tears freely flowed down into his beard. "You're all grown up." Something from the previous night buzzed in my ear.
No more me, Robbie. No more me. Time to grow up.
And then it clicked, and my screams joined those of my mother in a terrible chorus.